Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bella Gamer, and I know this video has come out a little late. You can blame Armor Core for that. I had to beat New Game Plus Plus. It is what it is. Today we're talking about the Animist. So the Animist playtest, I've read it over and I've had some time to digest everything I've seen here. And now we're going to go over it together, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. Overall, if you want my general opinion of the Animist, I think the Animist, at least this playtest, because every class has had a weird playtest and then was not very different, but some of them were very different when they actually came out. So, I'm not taking any of this necessarily for granted. This is just what we have for the playtest, what they want to see us do and mess around with. And my general idea of the Animist for this playtest is that the Animist is a really strong caster that is just a little too complex, and there's just a lot of things to manage. I think that if you like complex classes, which I do personally, I think it's going to be a really good one. It has a lot to offer. But if you like the idea of Animist, but you don't like super complex classes, then I think there's going to be some people who are a little disappointed with how everywhere it is. So let's get into it. First and foremost, wisdom, key attribute. So another wisdom caster. I'm kind of tired of wisdom casters. I wish there was a wisdom martial class, but whatever the case, we have another wisdom caster. And I know I missed druid last time. There's 3 wisdom spellcasters now. I'm happy we do have another wisdom based class, as it gives more viability to the skill itself. There's more reason to want to invest in it in case you want a multi-class archetype. But still, wisdom-based caster, and it has 8 plus constitution modifier. Now, something that some of you might not realize, most of the casters are balanced between 6 and 8 HP based on how many spell slots they have access to. The wizard and sorcerer have more spell slots than the other classes do, so they get, 6 HP, while all the other casters have 8. This having 8 means it's going to have a little bit less than sorcerer and wizard, but the Animist actually has more spell slots than most of the other casters, which I find interesting. Nothing super fantastic. A lot of this, you don't get a lot of skills, but there's a reason for that. You only get nature, religion, and 2 plus your intelligence modifier skills, which makes it one of the least skill-based ones, especially for a class that's not going to be based very much on intelligence. In fact, intelligence is not very well. I would say actually intelligence is not a bad secondary, tertiary stat based on some of the stuff we'll see here. So overall, you're not going to have a lot, but you will have a lot. It'll make sense. Attacks make sense. Defense up to medium armor proficiency. This puts him on par with both the War Priest Cleric and the Druid. So very interesting. Makes you a little bit more tanky. And nothing else special up here, so let's go ahead and continue down. Now, the first thing that you actually see that's unique to the class is the Apparition attunement. And there's a lot of text here. So I'm just going to boil it down to when you start the game, you start with 2 apparitions. You attune, well, you don't start with 2 apparitions. You can attune to 2 apparitions. And the thing with attunement is that when you can attune to any of the spirits currently available in the game, and it changes pretty frequently for your character. So you have this kind of rotating slots of multiple extra layers to your character. Think of apparitions as kind of like subclasses, only not permanent, which is very, very interesting. Now, of your 2 apparitions that you're attuned to, you get 1 primary one, and all the other are secondary. Now, the only real benefit that the primary one gives is that your primary one allows you to utilize its vessel spell and its avatar form when you get access to the avatar form. Now, they also mention in here as well that you can disperse your you can disperse your apparitions, and that is a feature for specific feats and is not a common feature in the class. Now, whenever you attune, you're attuned to all apparitions until your next daily preparations, unless you have some other feat that allows you to switch. So essentially, every day your character chooses which apparitions to select, and then you go with that for the rest of the day. But your primary can actually be changed on a rest, a 10-minute rest. Whenever you channel to get your focus points back, you can also swap your apparition, meaning that if the focus spell you got isn't really working for you, then you can swap to a different apparition, which is very good, though it does mean that you get access to only one of their focus spells unless you gain access to multiple primary apparitions, which is something we'll talk about. All in all, you'll actually get access to, you can see here, 4 apparitions, which means you have 4 slots that you slot in every day, and there's a lot. We'll get to that. So the next strange thing, I'm going to kind of skip through a lot of this because I'm just going to explain it all to you here, is the apparition spellcasting. And the apparition spellcasting, you can see here, it has this strange 2 + 2, 1 + 1, whatever. What this is there's actually your Animist spells and your apparition spells. Now, the Animist is both a prepared caster and a repertoire caster. The crazy thing is, so each of your apparitions give you access to a list of spells, and those spells can be used in your apparition slot. And your Animist gets a prepared Animist slot or slots. And the interesting thing is each apparition gives you 1 spell per spell level that you can utilize in that slot. But all apparition spells are considered signature spells, so they can be heightened freely. The crazy thing about this is, since your apparition gives you a spell per spell level, that means you not only get a signature spell per spell level like normal classes get, you actually get 4, unless one of your apparitions get dispersed. So you have 4 spells per spell level that can be heightened freely and count as signature spells. The trade-off for this is that each spell level, you only get 1 apparition spell slot, except when you hit level 10. Then at level 10, you get 2 spells per spell level, except for your 2 highest spell slots. And you will get access to, when you hit level 19, a 10th level spell that your apparition gives you access to, but your Animist does not unless you get a spell for it. So the Animist has more spells than most other 8 hit point spellcasters, and gets all the tankiness of medium armor and everything that Wizard and Sorcerer doesn't get. Now, it comes at the cost of you don't have the freedom to choose your spells. Now, similar to Cleric, the Animist can select from any common spells on the Divine spell list that they know, and they can always learn a spell to learn any uncommon spells to then pull from. So unlike Witch and Wizard, they don't need to learn their spells, which I really wish they did, because the Animist is, I think, genuinely really strong, and that just extra factor would have made, not only would it have made things a bit more balanced, in my opinion, but it would have also actually made them easier, because then you're not dealing with a player who's not only toggling, up to 4 different apparitions and all their spell slots and all their extra features, but is also choosing from a massive list of spells for their prepared spells every day. I wish they, if anything, I just kind of wish they did like repertoire. Well, I guess repertoire for everything, honestly, just to make the number of spells that your character knows more sensible. It gives them an unparalleled amount of flexibility. They get a lot of like slotted spells that they have to choose based on which apparition they select, but they also can slot in whatever spells to complement those from the entire divine list, sans any uncommon or rare spells. So overall, TLDR, the Animist gets a lot of spells, but it's really complicated, and to get the most out of it, you have to consider way too many factors, more than most other spellcasters. So now there's two actually subclasses of Animists currently. There's the Channeler and there's the Sage. So the Channeler gets access to the Apparition's Whirl, and you get access to the Channeler's Stance feats. The Channeler's Stance feats is real quick. While you're in this stance, whenever you sustain an apparition spell or vessel spell that deals energy damage, you gain a status bonus to the spell's damage equal to the spell's rank. So they kind of get the benefit of sorcerer. By some of the sorcerer bloodlines allow you to do extra damage based on spells from their spell list. This is pretty much the same thing, only you need to go into a stance first. So there's an action cost, but it still feels like it kind of... I feel like Animist just steps on a lot of spellcasters' toes. And even though it does feel like a mix, and an interesting mix, I feel like there's just a lot of situations where the Animist, like for instance, compared to Sorcerer, you just have way more signature spells. Even though they're much more limited, you still have way more. And, also, this has an additional feature. Whenever you cast a spell that has the Vitality or Void traits that restores hit points, the target gains a status bonus to the amount of healing received equal to the spell's rank. That's something that sorcerers don't even get access to. Again, there is an action cost, but it's a singular action for a stance, and from a class that doesn't have a ton of stances. There are a few, but there's not a ton. Anyway, so this is for the Channeler, and you also get access to Apparition's Whirl. Once per round, you can choose which of your apparitions to be your primary. This is really, really powerful, as it allows you to essentially change what focus spell you have access to without the need to do the whole refocus thing. So the Channeler has a better way of switching between their different apparitions. Their whole focus is being able to use multiple apparitions well. And you can look at their boons. They kind of get the same thing that like the War Priest or Cloister Cleric do, which at certain level increments, they get different bonuses. For instance, at the 9th level, you get Mastery and Fortitude saves. And when you roll a success on a will save, you get a crit success instead, which is crazy that that's just not a feature of the class in general. At 13, your proficiency rank in your armors go up to Expert, and at 17th level, the first time in an encounter you enter a specific stance granted by an Animist feat, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your level plus 2. These temporary hit points last for 1 minute. So, overall, the Channeler is the tankier, more upfront style of Animist, and it makes a lot of sense why, considering some of the apparitions that you can get. It's very good and it's very diverse. I do like the way it plays. I just don't like how it kind of steps on the toes of some other classes. The other subclass is Sage. Sage is kind of the opposite. It does a lot better at focusing on the benefits that an apparition can give you. Now, when you initially get it, you gain the Apparition Sense feat and the Apparition's Possession action. So if we look at the feat first, the Apparition Sense is you essentially gain an imprecise sense that allows you to detect invisible or hidden spirits, haunts, and undead. So it makes you good at detecting haunts. There's so many archetypes that do the same thing, though. That's not super great. Though, you can allow a spirit or undead otherwise incapable of speech to speak through you as long as you are in direct contact with it. You can act as a link between a disembodied soul and their immortal bodies. As long as you're in contact with both the spirit and the living body that it belongs to in life, the spirit can use you to return to that body. Now, that sounds like a revival. That's not what they're saying. It's a very complicated way of saying that as long as the spirit and body are present, if the person is, for instance, their soul gets removed from their body by a trap or a spell or whatever, you can act as a bridge to connect their soul back into their body. Now, if someone is currently possessed at the time or someone else is in their body, they must make a will save against your spell DC or be cast out of the body when its original owner returns. This is very situational. It's very situational, but I guess I can't be upset because you just get it as a free benefit as a level 1 ability, you know? You just get it for being a sage anyway. It's cool, but it's way more situational than the Chandler stance, which overall is just really good. In fact, sages will probably want to get Chandler stance just because it's just really, really good. It will probably make a lot of people not want to play a sage. But let's look at the benefits of their skill and their boons. So they get Apparition's Possession. It's a skill that evolves through feats, but because it evolves through feats, it makes it kind of not good. So whenever you use this action, which you can only use once per round, you become immune to control effects and spells that attempt to influence your actions, such as charm or command, unless its spell rank is more than twice your level. Which means after your level 5, you can't, no spell, even a 10th level spell, can charm you anymore, which I think is nuts. A 10th level spell couldn't charm you as long as you're level 5, because it says it has to be more than twice your level. So yeah, that's very powerful actually, and a little dumb, honestly. Well, in this state anyway, the only actions you can use are Stride Strike, cast an Apparition spell, cast a Vessel spell, or use an action that has the Apparition trait. So the Apparition Possession is actually really bad because you can't use your Animist spells. You can only use your Apparition spells. And that's it. And the only benefit is you can't be charmed or command, which you have to rely on the enemy to use the action to make it worthwhile. Now, there are ways this evolves later, but overall, this is a really bad action that you're not going to take most of the time. It's highly situational. Most enemies don't have access to charm or command effects. Most GMs don't throw these at players because it's not fun to lose access to your character. So, yeah. Its benefit is highly niche, yet it restricts you, and it cuts your spellcasting essentially in half. Granted, only for until the next round, which makes this actually worse because then you just need to predict and use an action to defend yourself. I don't know. I don't really like Apparition's Possession. I think there's some interesting situations for it, but overall, it's just not as good as the Chandler one. Boons. So for the intermediate, you get your armor proficiencies faster. At level 9, you get expert rather than at level 13 here. So it's the same thing with cloistered and war priests, as different armor proficiencies. At 13th level, you gain spirit resistance equal to half your level and a +2 circumstance bonus on saving throws against spirit effects. You are immune to any effect that separates your soul from your body against your will, such as the Seize Soul spell. Spirit, I'm sure like anything a spirit does, you get resistance to and you get a circumstance bonus. Again, highly situational, only gets a specific type of enemy or types of enemies. And then again, nothing can force you to be separate from your body. What sounds like a really cool effect, but honestly doesn't happen in most games. So overall, a kind of garbage tier boon, especially compared to even what you get at 9th level, which is master proficiency in a fortitude saves, and when you succeed on a will save, you get a crit success instead. Like, this should just be here. It should just be a standard feature of the class. So yeah, Sage is kind of looking terrible. Level 17. Whenever a haunt, spirit, undead, or incorporeal creature fails to save against your spells, you gain a +2 circumstance bonus to your AC and saving throws against all the entity's attacks and abilities for the next 24 hours. This bonus applies only to the entity that failed its save, not others of the same type. In addition, you can select up to 2 apparitions as your primary apparition during your daily preparations. So, their level 17 boon is kind of nice if you're expecting to fight haunt spirits or undead or incorporeal creatures after level 17. A level you don't normally get to in most games, but even if you do, it's a very tight criteria considering the lack of not many creatures at that high level in general. And you can select 2 primary apparitions, which sounds cool, except Chandler gets Apparition's Whirl, where once per round they can just swap it as an action. So even though you get 2 primary ones, which means you have multiple choices on your turn, you still have to rest for 10 minutes to swap your primary apparition, and more than likely you're not going to be using the effects of one of your primary apparitions, like both of them in the same round. I mean, you can, but it's not as likely. So it just make Apparition's Whirl, the first level skill, essentially better than the ultimate boon of being a sage. Kind of sad, honestly. I just think sage is just worse. It just doesn't feel like it offers as much, especially as you're leveling up. All right, so general class features. Wandering is a unique tag that we're going to mention. I'm going to mention here in a little bit. I'm not going to talk about it now because it'll make sense. So you get your 3rd apparition starting at 4th level, and you gain actually access to an additional focus point at 4th level. That means that you get one and you get a free one at level 2 or at level 4, which gives you up to 2. Now, that sounds really cool, but that also sounds like it steps on the toes of like the Psychic or the Oracle, who also get free focus points. But I will say, in the Animist defense, they actually don't have any focus spell related feats. So unless they multi-class archetype or archetype out into another archetype that allows them to get focus spells, the most focus points an Animist can ever get is actually 2. It's just a nice benefit. They give you a second one for free, I guess. It's very strange. A lot of these are pretty much the same as the other casters. I already mentioned this one, Advanced Interlocution. This gives you the extra spell slots. They get their 4th apparition at 12th level. I think that both of these need to be bumped back a few levels. Like 7 and 15 makes more sense to me than 4th and 12th. Just for the sake of letting the players get used to their apparitions before they start giving them way more. And the 4th one does not give you an extra focus point, in case you're curious. They get weapon specialization, which is nice. And they eventually get to legendary spellcaster, which is nice. And then at 19th level, you gain a 10th rank apparition spell slot. So it's not Animist, doesn't come from the divine list, but from whatever your apparitions have. And the 10th level spell that your apparitions give you is the avatar spell, but when you cast avatar in this way, you do not become an avatar of a deity. Rather, a primary attuned apparition incarnates itself using your body, transforming you into the avatar described in your primary attuned apparitions entry. So yeah, that's really cool, except you don't get it till level 19, which is rough. You can't use the avatar spell until level 19. That's, oh god. It's like, it sounds cool, but can't we just get it a little sooner? I don't know. All right, before we look into the feats, let's look at the apparitions, and then we'll look into the feats. So the apparitions are kind of orientated in this way. You gain skills. Each apparition gives you 2 lore skills, which is why I mentioned earlier that intelligence might actually not be a bad secondary or tertiary trait that you want to pick up through your Animist, just because You have access to very unique lores that you get 8 of them. 8 lores, unless any of them obviously cross over, which there are a few, but up to 8 lores. That's pretty nutty, and that's a lot of lore. The other cool thing about the lore skills that you get is that at 8th level, they are considered expert, and at 16th level, you're considered master proficiency. So you get 8 master proficiency lore skills for free, pretty much. It's pretty good. Now, looking at the other apparition stuff, they each give you a cantrip and a spell at each level, as I mentioned before. They give you a vessel spell, and then here is the avatar spell that you only get access to at level 19. So, yeah. The Custodian of Groves and Gardens is kind of cool. It's the healing-based one. When you use the focus point in a 10-foot emanation with it sustained, all of them I think are sustained actions, and they can sustain up to a minute. You do a pulse every time you sustain, and every time you pulse, each living creature in that range gains 1d4 hit points. This also has the vitality trait, so it doesn't work on undead, and it does specify living anyway. It's an aura. It's really good. It's honestly very good effect. Granted, it is a sustained spell, so you have to sacrifice an action to keep it up, which makes it harder for spellcasting. Granted, they do make this a little bit easier through one of their feats. That feat also feels like a must-take, though. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But overall, really good. It does depend on positioning. Enemies can mess this up for you. Regardless, I do think the healing is really good, and it heightens every spell rank to an additional d4. So I think it's very solid, honestly. Imposter in Hidden Places gives you fortune-telling lore and underworld lore. Keep an eye on underworld lore. Underworld lore is actually very important for a variety of feats in the game. And you get discomforting whispers. This is another aura emanation. Each creature that starts its turn within the area of the spell must roll twice on their first attack roll that round or take the lower result. If an attack roll modified in this way results in a failure, that creature then takes a d8 void damage, and every 2 spell ranks, they take an additional d6 void damage. This is really good, but this also demands that you play a frontline Animist. That's not very hard to do, considering Animist does have some martial options, and it also gives you up to medium armor proficiency and 8 HP, which is one of the reasons why I think they have 8 HP. It's a decent one, but I don't think this is going to be a very commonly used vessel spell. Stalker in Darkened Boughs gives you forest lore and herbalism lore, so there's a little bit of crossover with the gardener. And you gain access to the Darkened Forest form. This allows you to have a polymorph that allows you to turn into a pest form, and it is sustained. So it's a transformation spell that is sustained, which, if I'm not mistaken, all the other ones aren't sustained. So this makes this worse, as to be in your new form, essentially you have to spend an extra rank. Now, this does give some extra benefits, though, as the apparition also helps you adapt more to your new form quickly. You gain a +1 status bonus to your attack rolls using the form's default attack modifier. Each time you sustain the spell, you can choose a different shape from those available via the associated spell. So at second level spell rank, there you go. Second spell rank, you can transform into animal form, and at 5th, you get elemental form, and also at 5th rank, you get a +2 to your attack modifier rather than +1. Now, this is overall really cool. You get this shapeshifter. You can change shape every turn, which is really cool. And it doesn't state anywhere that your hit points stay the same. So each time you sustain the spell, you can choose a different shape from those available via the associated spell, which means you just get more temp HP. Or maybe it just is considered you can only transform in animal forms if you transformed into an animal form. You can't go to pest form. And your HP remains, or whatever temp HP you gained stays the same, which I think is actually the intent. Regardless, it doesn't state specifically, so it makes it kind of vague. I do like the transforming bit, and I do like that it gives you a status bonus to your attack rolls and such. So it makes it good, and if you want to go like a polymorph attacker, this is definitely the way to go. But that's what people wanted Druid to do, and there's a whole Druid category dedicated to this. So again, it feels just like it's stepping on the toes of another class idea. I don't know if I like this just for that reason. I do like the status bonus to attack rolls, because obviously, even though you are doing a transformation kind of thing, you're spending an action every round to sustain it. So it's not going to be as good as like other martial characters. I don't know. I like it. I like the way it works, but I don't like it because I feel like it trivializes polymorph druid builds. So yeah. Steward of Stone and Fire. The two skills are Mountain Lore and Volcano Lore. Both of these are also really important for some of the feats. And you gain Earth's Bile. And of course, if you're curious about any of this, like I'm not mentioning each of the spells that are mentioned here or what their avatar forms are. The playtest material will be available in the link in the description, and as well, you can just find it on Paizo's website. So anyway, let's talk about the Steward of Stone and Fire's Earth Spile. I absolutely love this. It's a really good focus spell. And it's sustained, which makes it nutty. So what happens with this one is that when you cast it, you create a little explosion, a 10-foot burst explosion within 30 feet that requires a basic reflex saving throw. Each creature in the explosion takes 1d4 fire damage, 1d4 bludgeoning damage, and 1 persistent fire damage. The persistent fire damage is negated on a successful save, so if they save successfully, no persistent damage, but a single action, and then you just sustain it every round, you can just cause explosions. And then every 2 spell ranks beyond first, the damage, the fire and bludgeoning damage increases by a d4, and the persistent increases by 1. It's not a very high damaging focus spell, but the fact that you get it and it's a 10-foot burst gives it really, really good additional area damage to your list, which I love Earthbile. I think this is just the best one so far. Vanguard of Roaring Waves gives you mountain lore, so again, another crossover, and river lore. And it gives you river carving mountains. This is a very strange one. It's a movement-based one, I believe. And it's a single action. For the duration of the spell, you have lesser cover against range attacks and gain a +5 status bonus to your speeds. Once per turn, you can use an action to stride up to your speed while your apparition fills each square you pass through with lingering energy of a coursing river. These squares become difficult terrain until the start of your next turn. You can use river carving mountains while burrowing, climbing, flying, or swimming instead of striding if you have the corresponding movement type. So it's a speed buff that you have to sustain, which kind of sucks, but it also creates difficult terrain, and you gain essentially a +1 AC against range attacks, unless those attacks somehow circumvent cover, which some do. I do like this one. I like the ability of it. I don't know how frequently it's going to be used. It seems very situational. Seems like for a very particular job. And because it's sustained, I feel like people are just not going to be very eager to use this one. Though I do like it personally. Witness to Ancient Battles. I think this one's going to be a favorite amongst many people. Gives you Battlegrounds lore and Heraldry lore. I love Heraldry lore. It gives you knowledge on special heraldries you might see in combat, which you might learn some interesting information about armies or even kingdoms with it. Something I think is really cool. It gives you the Embodiment of Battle. This is a really cool one. It's a sustained action for the duration. Your proficiency in martial weapons is equal to your proficiency in simple weapons, and you gain a +1 status bonus to unarmed attacks and weapon rolls. And you gain the Reactive Strike, which is attack of opportunity. If you're coming over to the remaster, you essentially get attack of opportunity with this focus spell. And you gain the critical specialization effect of any weapon you're wielding when you cast or sustain the spell. So you can't change weapons oh no, you can change weapons, but you don't get the effect until you sustain the spell, which might not come to your next turn. Something important to know. The instincts of the apparition of battle run contrary to its use of magic, though. So for the duration, you suffer a -2 status penalty to your spell attack modifier and spell DCs. This is actually how you counteract the whole I want to be a spellcaster, but also martial. It's like, okay, cool. Take this focus spell, and then you gain a bonus to attacks and such, and all of the things martials get essentially. But you get a penalty to your spell attacks and spell DCs, so the spellcasting becomes less effective. And it's already kind of rough for spellcasting against higher level enemies. So essentially, you're dedicating yourself to martial going this way. Now, a couple notes on this one. I do like this one a lot, but there's a couple notes. First and foremost, it's crazy that this is several feats rolled into one. It gives you weapon proficiencies. It gives you reactive strike. It gives you crit specialization. It gives you crit specialization sooner because you get this at essentially level 1. Sooner than most other classes get access to crit specialization effects. That is nuts. Though, I will say, the +1 status bonus, eventually going to +2 and +3, is only good when you consider that your mains, like, no matter how you go, no matter how much strength you invest in, you're going to always be 1 point under the other martial characters. Now, this makes up that attribute difference, but it doesn't make up against the proficiency difference. So, considering at level 1, you're fine. You're actually going to be getting equal with all the other martials. But at level 5, you're going to be behind by 2. And when you hit level 8, you're going to be behind by 1. And then when you get the 7th rank spell, which is at level 13, all the other martials will be getting to master, and they'll be getting another stat point difference. So you'll get 2 points to make up the stat point difference, potentially, and 1 to make up for the... Well, I guess at level 13, you also become expert. So, yeah, you're just 1 under, which is fine. But because you sacrifice your spellcasting for it, this kind of just this is kind of a net loss for doing something as martial. I do like the fact that you can go martial a lot easier with the Animists, but I feel like it's just not going to have the same ability, especially since you don't have many feats that augment striking, which means you're going to have to multi-class archetype if you want to do that. So, while I think it's overall fine, and I think it's balanced, I think it's balanced, which means it doesn't make it less than a martial, because you still have spell casting when you're not doing this, and you can still spell cast spells that don't require spell DCs or spell attacks. So you still get a lot of ability, and you're just going to be a little bit under. This overall does make Animist the best martial-based class amongst spellcasters, which is interesting. So now, I know this video is going to be long, but I know everyone also just wants to know everything about the class. So let's go over each of the feats. We talked about Apparition Sense. We talked about Chandler's Stance. Let's talk about Intermediary Defenses. This is a very niche feat, and what it does is you gain Void Resistance equal to half your level, and you gain a +1 status bonus to saving throws and effects against haunts and the abilities of spirits and incorporeal undead. The Void Resistance is cool, but Void it's necrotic if you're coming over to the remaster for the first time. Is not very common, but it is relatively common. The fact that they get a pretty good resistance as a level 1 feat is pretty good, honestly speaking. The +1 status bonus is niche against specific types of enemies, though I do think it works. It just only works against saving throws. I kind of wish it was AC as well, just to give you a general bonus, but whatever. Intermediary's Defense is meh. It's okay. If you have an undead campaign you're going into, this is priceless. Any other campaign, it kind of just becomes like a C rank, in my opinion. All right, so now one of the other things that the Animist does is they kind of step on the toes of wizards with some of their feats, because some of their feats, and I think Witch as well, Some of their feats are also spell shaping. Spell shaping are meta magics, essentially, if you're coming over to the remaster. So spell shapes, they get expansion spell, which used to be, I think, widen spell, if I'm not mistaken. This one just expands cones, extends lines, it increases bursts. This increases all of those by either 5 or 10, depending on the length and the type of area you're doing. Overall, it's pretty decent. Now, there is an interesting feature to this, though. You can use this feat to increase the radius of an emanation spell with a duration by 5 feet by dedicating your primary apparition to maintaining the spell shape. Dedicating the apparition to the spell prevents you from using the apparition's vessel spell, apparition skills, or avatar form for the duration of the modified spell. But it does not prevent you from using the apparition's spells, only its vessel spell. So those focus spells that each of the apparitions give you access to, you can actually increase their aura distance by 5, which I think is pretty cool. But it does limit you in some other ways. And I do find it funny that when you're dedicating it to expanding, you can't use its apparition vessel spell. I guess it matters if you're using 2 primaries at the same time. But I just find it funny that you're more than likely using your primary's vessel spell and then maintaining it with this expansion. I think that's very funny. I don't know if that's the intent, but it only says when it's dedicated to doing this. So it's not dedicated before you cast the spell, but after, meaning that you can use its vessel spell and expand its aura, even though it prevents you from using the vessel spell afterwards. Very interesting. I don't know. It's a very strange one. All right, second level, they get Conceal a Spell, same as wizards do. It's the same spell shape as before. Don't really need to go into that one too much. Embodiment of the Balance is okay. What it does is it adds heal and harm to your apparition spell repertoire, allowing you to cast them with your apparition spellcasting. Oh, did I miss? No, I did not miss it yet. Okay. So, Embodiment of the Balance is okay. It allows you to be the team healer or to have an extra damage spell on your spell list. Overall, I think it's good if you want to do healing. And I don't think many of them actually do have healing. So this is good if you want to be the team healer. But if you don't want to be the team healer, you get plenty of other damage spells, so harm is not super necessary. This is the I want to be a healer feat, if any. Grasping Spirit spell. This one is really cool. So for a single action, this does have the concentrate trait. When you cast a spell, this is a spell shape, so mana magic. When you cast a spell, you can choose one target of within the spell's range and targets one creature. You can choose one target for the spell that is up to 30 feet out of the spell's normal range. Your apparitions briefly take on semi-physical form. Okay, there's a lot to this. What it does is you can grab someone with your apparition to pull them into the range of your spell as long as they're no more than 30 feet out of your spell's normal range. And if they're less than 30 feet, they're just pulled 30 feet directly to you, not to the edge of the range of your spell. This allows them to just pull them into your spell range. And if this spell misses, your apparitions conserve the spell, making it so that you retain any focus points or spell slots used to cast the spell. You do waste your turn if it fails. Oh, I didn't mention it as well. The pull effect towards you uses your, it's a fortitude save against your spell DC. So you can pull them towards you and affect them with a spell. I think this is funny, especially because that singular action could instead be used to move up to the target to get them in range. Most characters have at close to 30 feet. It's very easy to get 30 feet. I just find it funny that instead of spending the action to run over to them, you're just like, no, come to me, and pull them over. It's really good for dispositioning enemies, though it can only be used on enemies who are outside your spell range. It's very unique, but there's a lot of times where a character is just like out of your 30-foot spell range. So this is actually a really good spell shape. All right, next up is Sustaining Dance. This is, I think, it's a must-take feat. It's really, really good, and it's kind of silly. But every time you sustain a spell, you either step or leap, and then you sustain the spell. So you step or leap and then sustain, which is nice if an enemy is proccing attacks that have or is using a reactive strike against concentration actions. I do find it funny that it's not step or stride. I guess leap is just more limited, and it goes with the dance theme of Sustaining Dance. So overall, Sustaining Dance is really good. Sustain never feels good, and Reload gets special actions, but Sustain never really did. So I hope the new Witch gets this as well, as I think Sustaining Dance, or whatever version the Witch gets, just makes Sustaining feel a little less awful. All right, next up is Apparition's Enhancement. This is the standard. You cast a spell as a free action. You can enchant your weapon to deal an additional D6 spirit damage, and the strike gains the divine trait. It's good. It's a little bit more unique than the normal form from most spellcasters. I like this one overall, and it works especially on Animist, considering how they work. Though this doesn't work super well again with the Spirit of Ancient Battles, because you get worse spell casting when using that one. So it's like you're using a spell just to get an extra damage buff. I don't know. It's ironic that they don't work super well together, but there are a lot of spells that you can use that, again, don't require a spell DC or spell attack roll, in which case this works really well with that idea in mind. Channel Protection is very interesting. It's a singular action, and it requires Channeler Stance, so this is better if you're the Channeler, but you can obviously pick up Channeler Stance even if... I don't think they have that prerequisite. I actually didn't check. Let me double check real quick here. Nope. So even the Sage can't pick up Channeler Stance if they really want to. What Channel Protection does is you're in your Channel Stance, and your last action was to cast a spell from your spell slots. What you can do is you and all adjacent allies gain a +1 status bonus to AC and reflex saving throws until the start of your next turn. If the spell is at least 7th rank, the bonus becomes +2. So you actually get essentially like a parry or even raise a shield for you and all adjacent allies that also goes to reflex saving throws after using a spell, as long as you're in the stance. I like this one a lot. It works really, really well. And if you don't need to move or do anything after a spell, it gives you a bonus to your AC, which makes the Animist even more tanky. Oh goodness, divert control, this reaction. It's very interesting, but it's also very complicated. So the trigger is your turn begins while you're under the effects of a charm or somewhere spell, or an effect that would give you the controlled condition. Your attuned apparitions take control of your body. You ignore the effects of the charm and the control condition and other spells that attempt to dictate your actions until the end of your turn. This turn still counts against the spell's effect and duration. While ignoring the effects in this manner, your apparition gets to choose what single action you take. Now, if you're benefiting from the apparition's possession ability, so Sage is the only one who gets a special effect. You can't even pick it up as a feat like the other one we just mentioned. You get 2 actions instead, and you can use any action normally allowed by apparition's possession. So it works a little bit better for Sage. It's a reaction if you're specifically being charmed or controlled in some fashion. But that's very rare. This is very niche. It works with the lesser of the 2 subclasses. And even with the one class that it would actually super benefit from, you only get 2 actions still. I would have preferred if the Sage at least got 3 actions and made their unique resistance at least super good in some niche situations. 2 actions is not terrible. I think there's some situations where this comes up. But overall, divert control is kind of meh. It's a reaction for a class that doesn't normally get reactions, though. So, something to keep in mind, an extra feat in your toolkit if nothing else looks appeasing to you. But I think overall, kind of a waste of a feat slot. Walk the Wilds, a very interesting one. You add animal form to your Apparition spell repertoire, allowing you to cast it with the Apparition spellcasting. And if you are currently attuned to the Stalker and Darkened Boughs, you can increase the duration of your Darkened Forest form focus spell to sustained up to 5 minutes when using it to transform into a form granted by the animal form. So this one works with a specific apparition, and it adds an extra spell to your repertoire. I think this is overall good. It doesn't add the wandering trait though, which is something I haven't mentioned yet, but it is something that's very interesting that wandering didn't get added to, especially because it works specifically better with one of the apparitions. Regardless, I do like this one in general, and it makes you want to take, at least for one of your slotted ones, the Stalker in the Darkened Boughs, which with considering how many apparitions you get, I don't think it's a very hard thing to keep an extra one. And you get this feat at level 4, which is when you get a third apparition. So you can use that third extra slot you gained just purely for the Darkened Bough Stalker, just so that you can get more animal form in your spell list. So I like this one a lot. All right, next up is Apparition's Stabilization. It's a 6th level feat, and it has the wandering traits. But let me go over it first. So, if a reaction would disrupt your spell casting action, since it might have the manipulate trait, and reactive strike does disrupt manipulate traits, attempt a DC 15 flat check. If you succeed, your action isn't disrupted. For each additional attuned apparition you have beyond the first, decrease the DC by this check by 1. For example, an Animist with a third apparition, which you would have at level 4, would have a DC 13 flat check rather than 15. You never have a DC 15 unless you've dispersed your apparitions, which you can't even do at this level. So when you pick this up, it's a DC 13 flat check, and when you get your 4th apparition, it becomes a DC 12. If you disperse any of your apparitions, it reduces by 1 to a minimum of a DC 15. I feel like that would have just been an easier way to describe it, honestly speaking. But if you pick it up through multi-class archetyping, which you might only get 1 apparition at that point, then this makes a lot more sense. But it's just a very complicatedly worded feat, and it's for a situation that's very rare, which is when your spell gets disrupted. Overall, it works better than most other casters who have this feat specifically, because you actually can reduce the DC to a more reasonable number. I don't know if it makes it worth taking, but I do like it at least better than the other spellcasters who can attempt to resist their spells being disrupted. Oh, yes, and the Wandering trait. So the Wandering trait is, and we'll go back up here because it's kind of nutty. The Wandering trait is a unique feature for the Animist. When you make your daily preparations, you can retrain any Wandering feat you know for any other Wandering feat available at the level you took the exchanged feat, including lower level wandering feats as usual. You must meet all the new feats' other prerequisites. So, if you select this particular one at level 6, you can swap it for another level 6 wandering feat, or any prior ones. I don't think there are any prior ones, but if there were, you could. And that makes wandering really good, and that also kind of steps on the toes of the inventor, or the fighter, even. I don't think it's as bad, especially because they're not casters, obviously. But I do find the fact that the Animist is just very strong with the ability to swap certain feats. I think they're absolutely nuts. But yeah. So Wandering is really, really cool. And the reason why I actually do like Wandering, I don't think it's actually that bad, is a lot of Wandering feats actually tied to specific use of certain apparitions. So if you're not using the apparition, the feat might become useless, as for like the Walk in the Wilds, which isn't a wandering feat, which I think is strange. But yeah, so this allows you to swap them to fit the apparitions that you're attuning to. I like the idea behind them, but it does give them just a lot more variety than other classes. Blazing Spirit. Now this one has a requirement of Battleground lore or Volcano lore that you get as an apparition skill. So you must have an apparition that gives you these lores, which is why this is also wandering. And this is a good reaction. It can be used once per 10 minutes. And the trigger is an adjacent creature damages you with a melee attack, or a creature damages you with a melee unarmed attack. What this does is, upon the trigger, you gain a level of resistance to the triggering damage equal to your level. And the triggering creature takes a d6 fire damage and 1 persistent fire damage. This increases to 2d6 and 2 at 12, and 3d6 and 3 at 18. This is really good. This is just a solid reaction. If something hits you, not only do you just gain resistance gain resistance equal to your level, that's also just a nuts amount. 6 resistance is a lot, even at level 6. But yeah, equal to your level, that's a good amount. It's a reaction granted once per 10 minutes. And it does not only fire damage back to the enemy, but persistent fire damage. That's really good. That's a really good feat. I absolutely love Blazing Spear. I think it's wonderful. And I think it fits the Animist style of being more of an upfront caster. Grudge Strike, another wandering feat. And this one requires heraldry lore or underworld lore. Now, you use 2 actions. You make a strike against a creature within your reach. You gain a +2 circumstance bonus to this attack, and you deal an additional 2d6 void damage. If the target is undead, though, the strike does an additional 2d6 vitality damage instead. This ability gains the vitality trait or void trait depending on the type of extra damage it deals. This stacks really well with the Witness of Ancient Battles because you get that status bonus, and then for 2 actions, you can make an accurate strike that makes up the difference between you and other marshals. And on top of that, it actually mostly works in your favor. Typically, you would gain a +1 over other marshals. Granted, it uses 2 actions. And considering that the other one requires a sustained action to do, it's a lot to keep up to do martial combat. But with this particular feat, it allows you to hit just as good as marshals at just less frequency, which I think works really well. It still maintains the game's general balance, and it does make up for the additional action use with the additional void/vitality damage. Overall, an amazing feat and really good if you want to go a battlefield, martial animist. Medium's awareness, the apparition you've attuned to gives you a +2 status bonus to your perception checks made to seek and when using perception for initiative. At 12th level, the status bonus increases to +3, and at 20th level, it increases to +4. So it's slightly better than that one general feat that gives you a +2 status bonus to your initiative checks. Overall, it's a really good one. Very solid. I don't know if I'd select this because it's only actually... the bonus to perception when seeking is good, but you can just get a general feat that gives you +2 status to initiative anyway, which is the main thing you'd use it for. Maybe some retraining later on when you get to 12th level and this feat gets a little bit better. But when it's considered to be in the same category as both Grudge Strike and Blazing Spirit, I just don't see a lot of use coming to Medium's awareness. Though it does have the Wandering trait. So if you ever need to use certain apparitions that don't have any of the required lores, you can use Wandering, which I think is really good. Roaring Hearts. This one requires mountain lore. And for 2 actions, you stride up to twice your speed. At any point during your movement, you can shove up to 2 creatures you pass adjacent to. If you succeed at shoving these enemies, each ally within 30 feet of your destination square gain a number of temp HP equal to half your level, or equal to your level if you succeeded on both of the shove attempts. As the turbulent spirits you've attuned to reward you for acting in an appropriately fierce manner. These temporary hit points last until the beginning of your next turn. It's interesting. It's 2 actions to stride twice, so it's good if you're also trying to bust through an area. You can push past some enemies if you've got athletics invested into and strength. I wish this gave a bonus to the shove as well. It would make it feel a little bit more enticing, but it's a very situational feat that, depending on your playstyle, you might select. But again, for the playstyles I think would take this, Grudge Strike, Blazing Spirit. And one of the deities give volcano lore and mountain lore, so Blazing Spirit kind of just looks better in my opinion. But Roaring Heart might come in handy. All right, on to level 8. We're almost halfway done with the feats, but then we'll be done with the video. So, Possession Echo. It's 1 to 3. It's a 1 to 3 actions, and it's a spell shape, and you can do this once per hour. So you relinquish control to your apparition in exchange for additional power. You regain 1 expended apparition slot that is at least 2 ranks lower than your highest ranked spell, Your apparition then immediately uses your body to cast an apparition spell that can be cast using that slot. The number of actions required for the possession echo is equal to the action cost of the spell cast. Regaining control following the possession is difficult, however, and you're confused until the end of your next turn. So, once per hour, you can get a spell slot back as long as that spell is not in your highest 2 rank of spell slots. I think this is really good, but becoming confused is potentially really, really bad. It's good spell efficiency, and I think there's times this becomes useful, but that confusion effect can be really nasty if done in a bad way. So overall, high risk, high reward. If you're into that kind of thing, Possession Echo is really good. And yeah, just extra spell efficiency. I actually like this one, and I don't think it's all that busted, especially because the next round being confused, you can just end up doing nothing on your next round. So it at least gives you better spell efficiency. That's all I can say. Soul synchronization. This requires the Sage practice, so Sage gets a benefit. Now, this augments the use of Apparition's possession. And while your Apparition's possession is in effect, you gain the following additional benefits. Once per round, you can attempt a recall knowledge check as a free action, sharing the result with your Apparition. This part is weird, sharing the result with your Apparition. I can only assume this means that you're not withholding this information from your Apparition. I don't know. Free recall knowledge check, super good. All strikes you make with a weapon or unarmed strike deal an additional 2 points of spirit damage, also potentially really strong. And you gain resistance equal to half your level against all physical attacks, but your weakness to spirit damage equal to 1/3 your level. But you gain a weakness to spirit damage equal to 1/3 your level. So overall, this makes Sage actually feel a lot better. Now, when you use that action that doesn't normally give you a lot of actions that restricts the kind of abilities or spells that you can use, now you get a free recall knowledge. Your strikes deal an additional 2 spirit damage, and you gain physical resistance equal to half your level at the cost of a weakness to spirit damage. Spirit damage is going to be very uncommon. Obviously, you're not going to want to use this against spirits, but most other enemies, this works really well. And it makes the Sage feel really good. I wish this feat was level 6 or 4. 4 would be even better, because Sage feels terrible until you pick up Soul Synchronization. But once you do, you even get like some martial ability, and a free recall knowledge is just really good. Granted, it's not technically free because you have to spend an action to gain the benefits of Apparitions of Possession, but I consider it free if you're also like striking or in combat. So, and you do get the benefit of the resistance, obviously, until the start of your next turn. So, Soul Synchronization is a really good feat and actually makes Sage, I feel, a lot more worth it. All right, Spirit Walk. You need fortune telling lore, which I think there's only one of the apparitions that currently has fortune telling lore. While you're searching or using Detect Magic in Exploration mode, you and up to 4 allies within 30 feet don't trigger reactions from haunts and spirits. Your apparition sight is now a precise sense, so you can just straight up see invisible spirits and undead and haunts. And you gain a +2 circumstance bonus to recall knowledge checks related to any entities you can detect with your apparition sight. After rolling initiative, you and each ally within range of your apparition sight gain resistance equal to half your level against damage dealt by haunts or spirits until the end of your first turn. So this is really good. It's a really good wandering feat, as if you're going through a haunted house, Spirit Walk kind of necessary. And when you're not going through haunted house, wandering can be used for a different feat. I don't think, Soul Synchronization is not wandering, but there's a lot of good feats even prior to this one that you can select. So overall, Spirit Walk I think is really good. And I think Spirit Walk can be good in, like, it's funny that they have medium's awareness over here, because this gives you extra perception and stuff against spirits and such, and every other time you can just get a general bonus to initiative and perception. So these two work really well together here. All right, Windseeker. you need the Walk the Wilds feature. Or is it a feat? I actually don't remember what Walk the Wild. I think it's a feat. Yes, you need this level 4 feat, Walk the Wilds, to select Windseeker. So wings free you from your shackles of the ground below. You add aerial form to your apparition spell repertoire, allowing you to cast it with your apparition spell casting. Whenever you use aerial form to gain a form that grants you a specific acrobatics modifier, you gain a +1 status bonus to your acrobatics checks, making you a better flyer. Really cool. Also, if you are attuned to a stalker and darkened boughs, you add the bat and bird forms in aerial form to your darkened forms, darkened forest form list. Oh, that's really hard. So, really good. I do like this. It's interesting that it doesn't say you add aerial form. You just add those to, I guess, they're just 2 forms you can select, specifically the bat and bird. I think this is very weirdly written, but essentially it makes the stalker and darkened boughs better. And it's probably just one of the best apparitions currently, as it just has so many feats specifically orientated for it. All right, level 10. We're halfway through, and then I can be done. This has been a long video. I don't normally do in-depth videos like this, but I feel like with these classes, especially Animist, it's kind of necessary, as some of these are somewhat complicated. Apparition's Quickening. This is the Quicken spell shape that you can get as most other spellcasters. Though, it does come at a cost, and it can only be used with a spell that's 2 ranks lower than your highest rank spell slot. And you have to draw on the power of one of your apparitions. You choose one of your attuned apparitions. It's dispersed until you reattune to it at your next daily preparations. That's pretty serious. So it's essentially Quicken spell with a much higher cost, which I think is fair considering all the benefits Animist gets. But it also kind of feels bad for Animist who wants Quicken spell, as it's going to cost them to do so. And specifically, it has this additional feature which will probably be added to the other ones. You can only use this on a cantrip or spell from the class matching the one you gain this feat from. So even if you picked up Quicken casting from another source, which would be at level 20, you can't use it for your Animist / apparition spells. I do think that this one works. It just feels like it's at a much higher cost than other classes, which fair considering everything I've said in this video. Fly on shadowed wings. This is a really cool one. Once per hour, you can choose to have one of your apparitions be embodied, and you gain a fly speed equal to your land speed for 10 minutes. But your chosen apparition is dispersed for the duration, though it automatically reattunes to you 10 minutes later. So essentially infinite flight at level 10, which is really strong. Well, I should say infinite flight. It's once per hour, which I think makes it a lot more balanced, especially compared to the kineticist, who can just do it infinitely. Though it does make it worse in kineticist, who can just do it infinitely. But I like this feat a lot. 10th level, you can fly for 10 minutes every hour. Pretty good. And I mean, if it's during combat, it kind of sucks because you lose that dispersed spirit. You can't use their spells, skills, or whatever. But outside of combat, there's almost no cost to this. So I think it's really, really good. Overwhelming Energy. This is the same as the Wizard spell shape, which allows you to give a spell you cast, it reduces or ignores the target's resistance to acid, cold, electricity, fire, sonic, vitality, or void damage equal to your level. This applies to all damage the spell deals, including persistent damage and damage caused by an ongoing effect, such as wall of fire. A creature's immunities, though, remain unaffected. So Overwhelming Energy, just a really solid spellcaster feat in general. And considering the expanded spell list that the Animist technically has access to, you're going to actually get a lot of this, because Divine doesn't have a lot of the energy damages, but because of your apparitions, you actually do get most of these. So I think it's just very solid. All right, starting at level 12, Shadows Within Shadows is a reaction, and this is a wandering feat, so keep that in mind. Now, it does have a requirement that you have a apparition with underworld lore. The trigger is you would be detected by an enemy seeking you with perception, or an enemy would succeed at a counteract check to end a spell you've used to keep yourself hidden, concealed, or undetected. It's essentially a reaction that makes the enemy re-roll the triggering action and take the lower result. This just makes you better at stealthing. If you mess up on a stealth check, or if the enemy rolls really, really good, they have to re-roll and take the worst effect, which I think is really good. And it makes Shadows Within Shadows, honestly, a very, very powerful feat if you're going for a stealth style build. All right, Spiritual Guidance, level 12. This is actually a really good one. This is another wandering one. As a reaction, upon the trigger of you and an ally would fail but not critically fail with a strike or spell attack against an enemy you can perceive. You can do this once per 10 minutes, and upon the triggering action, the originator of the triggering strike or spell attack attempts a second attack and takes the higher result. So once per 10 minutes, you can give an ally a advantage. There we go. I lost the word for a second. Advantage on a spell attack or strike. Really, really good. And it just has to be against an enemy you can perceive. So overall, this is a very powerful one. Honestly, a reaction once per 10 minutes to give advantage. Very solid, though obviously in a support tier. Granted, it's you or an ally would fail. So you can even do this for your own strikes, making martial even more a viable thing for the Animists. All right, next up is Whispers of Warning. It's another reaction, and this one's similar to the last one, but kind of the opposite. So it's a reaction, and the trigger is you would be hit, but not critically hit by an attack. Once per 10 minutes, you can force the attacker to reroll the triggering attack, and they must take the lower result. So it's an attack, which means grapples or trips or anything as well. Anything that's the attack trait, this applies to. So it's a really, really good reaction and is the defensive version rather than Spiritual Guidance, which is the offensive version. Overall, really good, especially if you want to go a tank Animist style build. Level 14. I love this feat. This is a really cool feat because it doesn't have a cost. It's Banish Falsehoods of Flesh, which that's a cool feat name. And there's a lot of text here. I'm just gonna shorten it up for y'all. For a singular action, you can attempt a religion check to counteract a polymorph effect currently affecting a creature you're aware of within 30 feet. If you know the creature's true name, you get a +2 status bonus to the check. If the target is somehow under multiple polymorph effects, you can choose which one to attempt to counteract. The GM chooses randomly if the separate effects aren't obvious. The target is then temporarily immune for 1 day. I love this because for a singular action, which doesn't even technically have an audible trait or anything, the creature doesn't have to understand you or anything. You can just be like, no, you ain't, and they transform back into what they were before. It just requires a religion check. It's just really funny. I just love it. I think it's really cool, and it's just an interesting effect. What else can I say? Other people have to use spell slots or something for this, and you can just be like, no, you ain't, and then they just transform back. I love this feat. It's really, really good. Cardinal Guardians. This is a channeler specific feat. So in comparison to the Sage one, which you got at level 8, this one requires to be level 14. Quite some time. But the benefit is you have mastered the art of drawing the power of cycles of your apparitions, turning the success of one apparition's magic into the chance for a next one to strike. Whenever you succeed at a spell attack with an apparition spell or vessel spell, or when a creature fails to save against such a spell, you gain a +2 status bonus to your next spell attack modifier, or that creature gains a -2 status penalty to its save against such spells. Now, it can't be from the same apparition, so it has to be a spell on one spell list, and then you can use it on your next turn for another spell list. Granted, they can even be done in the same turn. You get this benefit until the end of your next turn, and you don't even need to be in your channeler stance to do this. Overall, this is really good. And if that all seems really complicated, I'll just kind of shorten it down. If you succeed with one spell, either a spell attack or a spell, or they fail a spell save, your next one, as long as it belongs to a different apparition that you have under your control, is more likely to hit the enemy in some form or fashion. So this makes your spell casting, especially if you're just cycling through your apparitions, much more effective and can make Chandler a really, really powerful spellcaster. Honestly, this is probably a broken feat. I would have to play test with it myself, but I feel like this one can be used for great effect in the game. All right, 16th level feats. Forest's Heart, single action. This one is a stance, and it has the wandering trait. Now, the requirement is that one of your apparitions have the forest or herbalism lore. And you adopt a stance that allows you your spiritual energy to inhabit and control roots from the ground. I actually absolutely love this one. So what it does essentially is you gain access to a unique strike that deals 4d8 bludgeoning damage, is in the brawling group, and has finesse and grapple and reach 30. That means you can grapple an enemy from 30 feet away and smack an enemy from 30 feet away with a root. Now, it does say specifically that inhabit and control roots from the ground you stand on to act as a brutal extension of your will. It doesn't state specifically that you can't use this. There's no requirement that you're in an area that has roots or anything. So you can just make roots spawn from the ground as long as that is deemed viable. And one of the interesting things about this is attacks made with these unarmed attacks do not gain additional damage from striking runes, but they can benefit from the item bonus bestowed to you by hand wraps of mighty blows. So you can make yourself more likely to strike, and they're considered unarmed strikes. So anything that applies to unarmed strikes that you make get a lot of these benefits. I feel like this has a lot of interesting potential, especially with multi-class archetyping. And 48 bludgeoning damage, even though it doesn't add a straight modifier to it, is really good, even if you can't add striking to it. And honestly, it makes sense. It has a range of 30 feet. It's just really, really good. Especially, hell, you can even use this with the Witness of Ancient Battles to get the bonus to attacks, because it applies to unarmed attacks as well. So overall, Forest Heart, really, really powerful. All right, here's a very interesting one. Spiritual Spell Shape Stance. It's essentially the meta magic stance for this one. It's also wandering, important to know. So while you're in the stance, once per turn, you can use a spell shape feat that normally requires one action as a free action, but only to affect spells that deal spirit, vitality, or void damage. This doesn't allow you to avoid or bypass any other restrictions or limitations normally associated with the spell shape feat. So yeah, it only applies to, honestly, mostly your Animist spells, which I find is very interesting, as most of those come from the Divine spell list, which will do a lot of spirit, vitality, or void damage. But it's really good. And if you don't have Chandler stance, this is just a good stance to be in. So if you're a sage, this one might be the one to go into, honestly. I actually really, really like this one. Free spell shapes is very solid and just makes you a much more dynamic caster, which I'm all for. Tame the Land, one action. This is a stance and wandering, so you can swap it up as necessary. Now, this does have a requirement of having academia lore or farming lore. I don't know if any of the apparitions had academia lore. I might be mistaken, but I don't remember seeing that one. Anyway, while you're in this stance, you ignore all natural difficult terrain, and you gain resistance equal to half your level against damage dealt to you by animals, beasts, fae, and plants. This is a really good one for wandering because obviously you might not always be in a situation where those kind of enemies or natural difficult terrain are common. But if you ever do go into a wild setting, this is actually a really good one to swap into. So because it's wandering, it makes it a lot more viable. I think this one's very solid. All right, 18th level, Echoing Channel, one action. This is a concentrate action, so keep that in mind. You do need the feat Embodiment of Balance, which gave you resistance to vitality and void damage before. So when you pull forth vitality or void energy, your spiritual allies funnel it to another target of your choosing. If your next action is to cast a 2-action harm or heal, to heal or damage a single creature, choose yourself or one other additional creature adjacent to either you or the target. The target that creature with a one action version of the same spell you just used, even if it would otherwise be out of the spell's range. This spell is the same rank as the 2 action harm or heal you cast and doesn't cost another spell slot. So that's a lot of words. Let me boil this down. If you're using a healing spell, you can use a 2 action heal on an ally that's 30 feet away, and then you can target an ally adjacent to you or yourself with a 1 action heal version of the same spell at the same spell rank. Really good. Simultaneously, if you're fighting an enemy and you're using the 2 action harm to harm another enemy, you can then hit the enemy next to you who's within your reach with the 1 action version. Or you can target a enemy that's 30 feet away with the 2 action harm, and then target an enemy adjacent to them with the 1 version of the 2 action harm, which with the 1 action version of the harm spell, the same spell rank. Overall, this is really good. I can see a lot of situations where this comes in handy. For a level 18th feat, I think this one is actually pretty good. All right, Soul Cycle. This one requires sustaining dance and at least 1 Animist stance feat. So you have a stance as well as a sustaining dance. Really easy to take with Chandler, for instance. So when your turn begins, you can instantly use the sustaining stance. For a free action, you step or leap and then enter an Animist stance that you know. So this doesn't allow you to use the sustaining dance in addition to going into a stance, which kind of sucks. But I think it's fine because when your turn starts, you get a free step or leap. That's honestly really good, honestly. For a free action, you can step or leap and then go into a stance that you know. Very, very solid. And technically, there's nothing stopping you from going into the same stance that you're in. So yeah, every round, when your turn starts, you can step or leap as a free action. Honestly, that's very good. All right. Spirit Sacrifice, another free action. This one is very good. If you would die as the trigger, as a free action, you choose 1 attuned apparition. You do not die. You're reduced down to wounded 1 if you are a higher wounded condition, and you regain a number of hit points equal to twice your level. The chosen apparition is dispersed until you reattune to it in your next daily preparations. Wow, that's really strong, and Animist is impossible to kill. So impossible to kill, because what it does, and sorry, I was reading something here. You can use Spirit Sacrifice even while unconscious or otherwise unable to act. Now, every time you would die, you can just go back to 1 wound, and your hit points are restored equal to twice your level. And you can do this 4 times because you have 4 apparitions. Nothing stops you. So that's nutty, and it makes the Animist really hard to kill. Granted, if you do end up sacrificing all of your apparitions in this way, you do lose half your spell slots and a lot of really good feats and features. So it does come at a cost, but it makes the Animist nigh unkillable, which is incredibly powerful. Eternal Guide. Oh, level 20. This makes the Animist immortal, like actually immortal. All you have to do, there's a lot of text on this one, a lot of text. So I'm gonna just make this easy for y'all. As long as you come from a settlement, you call a settlement home. It actually doesn't even specify that it has to be your home. That has at least 100 people in it. Whenever you die and are not returned to life within 24 hours, you come back in 1 week. Now, you either come back being completely revived, or, as a very strange feature, you can instead bestow all your experience, memories, everything, kind of overwrite someone from that town, and just change your ancestry. Now, any bonuses you gain to your attributes do not change, even if you change to an ancestry that would normally have different bonuses. But you get the ability to retrain all your ancestry feats related to that. And as long as you don't die again before a week passed, you can just keep doing this ad nauseum. So you just are immortal. Granted, it doesn't stop you from aging out and dying, but, or maybe, actually, it might, because you can just re-inhabit, a different person. Yeah, you're just immortal. It's just become immortal of the feat. If you're killed, you come back a week later. Just don't die twice in the same week, but you're a level 20 character. So you're not likely to die twice in the same week. So yeah, become immortal of the feat. It's a level 20 feat, so I don't care really. It doesn't really break the balance of the game. You're a level 20 character, you already break the balance of the game. But it's cool. I like the fact that you can change your ancestry with it, technically. It's a very interesting feature. And then True Channel Spell. This gives you a 10th rank spell slot that can be used only for your Animist spell casting. So now you can have a Apparition spell and Animist spell at 10th level if you so choose. And that is the Animist. This video has taken an hour and a half. My God. All right. I don't normally do videos this long. And to be fair, the Animist is going to be probably the longer of the two classes. My thoughts, I gave them at the beginning, but I'm going to give them again here. Animist is really cool. Now, I understand this is a playtest. They're just kind of throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall, even really broken stuff, and seeing what sticks. I do feel like it steps on the toes of a lot of spellcasters. I think they get a lot of good defensive qualities and have an insane number of spells, especially compared to some of the other spellcasters. I do think it's overall balanced, and I don't think that there's any necessarily a good reason to play an Animist over other spellcasters over than just what your preference in spellcasting is. They pick a lot of things from everywhere. The Animist literally just puts their hand in everyone's cookie jar and takes a cookie out, and then that's what they put in their cookie jar, essentially. I think it's a very interesting class, but it's also incredibly complicated. There's a lot of advanced gaming features in this class, particularly, and I feel like a lot of people are going to struggle to bring out the true potential of the Animist. Regardless, I feel like a lot of people are going to love Animist, and if you like complicated classes, I think it's going to work really well. I was hoping they would take a little bit more of a standard approach and make these classes a little bit simpler, especially compared to a lot of the classes released recently. But all in all, I gotta say, Animist is really, really cool. I personally really like it, and it's a class I think I could really sink my teeth into. So it gets a big old thumbs up from me. I think the playtest is really cool, and honestly, less janky than some of the other playtests that we have seen. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. For those who watched this whole video, good luck with your games, especially your playtests. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see you all next time. I'm going to go rest my voice now. Bye.